Hey everyone, Scott with Dearly Departed Online here in beautiful our home. 108 degrees right now. It's practically a cold wave. Today's story has to do with Gibsonton. Now, Troy and I recently went to Florida, and we stopped in Gibsonton, which was one of my things I've always wanted to do, bucket list. Gibsonton is really close to Sarasota, which is the Ringling Brothers headquarters, and Gibsonton is sort of where all the sideshow performers and carnival workers would retire to during the off season. And I've always wanted to go because it's epic. I mean, the sideshow freaks is what they call them. Unusual people, unusual bodies. The Siamese twins, the Priscilla the monkey lady, and Jeannie Tomani the half lady, and the giant, her husband Al. And one of my favorite stories had to do with a miserable man by the name of Grady Stiles, who was known as the Lobster Boy, whose hands, his fingers were fused together, but he was just a mean, nasty drunk, and some would say karma caught up with him. But he was so detested, they couldn't even find pallbearers for his funeral. No one would even do that. So today's story is about Grady Stiles. These are my breasts, Mama. My dirty pillows.
Starting the story right about where it ends, it's been said that Grady is buried in Showman's Rest Cemetery in Florida. That was kind of unspecific. So upon further research, I discovered that he's actually buried in the Sunset Memory Gardens Cemetery, where we are now, in Thanatusasa, Florida. I've been to several Showman's Rest cemeteries. One's in Chicago, another one in Los Angeles. Sometimes they're near where a disaster occurred, such as a train crash or a fire. Carnival folk, or carnies as they're affectionately known, tend to be transient. So when their bodies are recovered, sometimes their identification is impossible. So they're buried in graves unmarked, or rather unnamed graves. This particular area that Grady is in the Sunset Memory Gardens doesn't have a disaster associated with it. It's more the proximity to where the circus folk spent their last years in retirement. Grady's section is called the International Independent Showman's Garden of Memories. Sideshow legend Grady Stiles was born with the genetic condition known as ectrodactyly, in which the fingers and toes are fused together to form claw-like extremities. Because of this, Grady Stiles performed under the stage name Lobster Boy. Grady's father, Grady Sr., used to announce that the condition had been in the family since 1840. A feat he was apparently proud of, and that any of their offspring had a 50-50 chance of getting it. Despite this, Grady had been married 3 times to 2 different women. He had 4 children. 1 boy and 1 girl had the same condition that he had. He put Grady Jr. into the carnival at age 7, billing themselves as the Lobster Family, and they became famous throughout the world. By most accounts, Grady was an abusive man. Not being able to walk, Grady's arms became extremely muscular, and when drinking, he had a quick temper. He'd swat anyone with them, then back up and headbutt them in the stomach. Sometimes he'd choke them by pinching his claws together. In 1978, when Grady's eldest daughter was engaged, Grady became so enraged that he shot and killed the groom the day before the wedding. Grady fully admitted to the crime, knowing full well that no prison had the capability to accommodate a man with his condition. So he was convicted of third-degree murder and sentenced to house arrest and 15 years probation. This is complicated. Grady was married to Mary, the electrified girl. Mary gave birth to Donna, the, quote, normal one, which apparently made Grady angry and protective, so he beat her more than the other kids. And we know he eventually killed her boyfriend. And Kathy, who was born with ectrodactyly. Mary divorced Grady because he beat her and the kids and constantly drank until he passed out in his own vomit. She married the midget man and had a son, Harry Glenn Newman. When Glenn got older, he would learn how to pound nails into his head and perform under the name the human blockhead. Mary divorced the midget man, remarried Lobster Boy, who in the meantime had married and fathered Grady Stiles III, who was born with ectrodactyly, and they all lived unhappily in this trailer home.
There's that same van that shows up in the video or the Google Earth. All right, I'm gonna park.
Okay, hold on to your hats. Grady Stiles, his wife Mary, their lobster child Grady III, and Mary's 18-year-old son, human blockhead Glenn, lived here. On the evening of November 29, 1992, the family were watching the film Ruby when lobster baby Grady III was put to bed. Mary and her son, blockhead Glenn, left to visit the trailer next door. The Stiles' front door was unlocked and the killer walked in. Grady's back was to the door. There were 4 shots, 3 in a neat row on the back of his skull that killed Grady, and 1 after he was dead, just to make sure. The police went to their first obvious suspect, Mary's son, blockhead Glenn. Glenn folded immediately. He defended himself, detailing Grady's habit of drinking in the morning, wheeling down to the local bar where he spent the day drinking, then returning to sit in front of the TV and drink more, ultimately falling into an abusive, violent stupor. After one exceptional beating, Mary sobbed to her son, "Something needs to be done." So naturally, blockhead Glenn hired a 17-year-old neighbor, Christopher Wyant, to, quote, make it better for her. Wyant agreed to a $1,500 fee to kill Grady. Wyant got a pal, Dennis Cowell, to get the gun used for the murder. When Mary gave the cops her statement, she told them that Grady abused her, beat her and the children until she bled, and that she didn't care if he was shot or stabbed as long as he was killed. She took full responsibility for hitman Wyant's actions and protected her blockhead son, claiming the payment came from her. The next day, Mary and Glenn were charged with first-degree murder, and hitman neighbor Christopher Wyant was charged with murder 1 and conspiracy to commit murder. All 3 were held without bail, and all were tried separately. Wyant went first. In January of 1993, he was convicted and sentenced to 27 years. The guy who got them the gun, Dennis Cowell, pleaded guilty of accessory charges and got 3.5 years. Mary's lawyer tried to persuade the jury of her innocence due to the battered wife syndrome. On the stand, she told more gory tales of Grady's abuse, including smothering her with a pillow, holding a butcher knife to her throat, and of course beating her. Lobster daughter Kathy testified that Grady beat her when she was 7 months pregnant and described her father as, quote, Satan himself. It was tough to sway a jury who didn't understand why Mary just didn't leave. They acquitted her of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit, but after an 11-hour deliberation, found her guilty of manslaughter. In August of 1994, Mary Stiles was sentenced to 12 years in prison, telling the court, "My husband was going to kill my family. I believe that from the bottom of my heart." Mary was freed on appeal in September of 1994, but 2 years later, the court upheld her conviction. She began her sentence in February of 1997. Mary's son, blockhead Glenn, rejected a plea bargain on his mother's advice and was swiftly convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit. The jury deliberated for only an hour in his case before sentencing him to life.
International Independent Showman's Garden of Memories. And we're here to see the murder victim. Not very well liked man who's buried here.
Thank you so much to Donna Lethal for putting this story together so many years ago for findadeath.com.
Thanks everyone for watching my video today. I especially thank the people who are sponsoring this page by the Patreon link, which is below, and the PayPal link if you'd like to send a donation. It's very much appreciated. It's how I make my living. It's how I can make these little stories happen. So thank you so much and take care. Until then, Scott with Dearly Departed saying bye. Bye.
You heard me.